Hey everybody, it's Hans Finzel coming to you from Denver, Colorado, and
Patrick Kelly coming to you live from Exeter, California.
we're Hans and Patrick, and we've written an exciting book called The Millennial Boom, helping millennials and boomers thrive together in life and work. So we want to talk in this video a kind of an overview of the generations. The first chapter in our book is kind of an overview. It's called Blast from the Past. And George Orwell, who wrote, of course, famous book 1984, said each generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it and wiser than the one that comes after it. Isn't that interesting? George Orwell said that. Well, Patrick and I did a lot of research on what are the generations, and one thing we learned is it's all over the board, people's opinions of the years. So it's not an exact science, but generally there are 5 generations, and we have a chart here in the Blast from the Past on the 5 generations. I'm just going to give them to you real quick from the youngest to the oldest. The youngest is the iGens, or Generation Z, born after the year 2000. One thing we've learned through the years is the names of the generations change as they get older. Patrick, I remember millennials used to be called Generation Y. You remember that?
I do remember that.
But now it's millennials. But anyway, the youngest generation, iGens and Generation Z. Millennials, we say, were born roughly between 1980 and the year 2000. The last 2 decades of before the year 2000. Generation X, a small generation, I like to call it the sandwich generation, born between 65 and 79. And they are today people in their 30s to mid 50s. Baby boomers, my generation, 76 million, born between 1946, right at the end of World War II, to 1964. And we boomers are in our late 50s to mid 70s now. And then the greatest generation, or the builders, they're also called, were born roughly 1910 to 1945. And they would be in their mid 70s all the way to 100. I have a friend, a lady in California, who's 101 years old. She's an awesome person. She's told me so many stories about growing up in Long Beach, California, in the 1920s and 30s. Crazy. So there are still some greatest generation around.
Well, the greatest generation for me, Hans, is my grandmother. I mean, my Nana. That was the true generation that you're talking about right now. And we don't see many of them in the workplace today. You might. Let's talk about some of the greatest generation, or the builders. So they were born between 1910 and 1945. This is back in a time where the upbringing of automobiles, they were going through World War I and World War II. The telephone was just becoming invented. I mean, this is the time where we would crowd around the radio and listen to the local, as we would call TV shows today, listen to the radio stations. And so my grandmother, it's interesting as we start to look at all the generations, but the building generation, or the builder generation, I remember many times visiting my Nana, and the one question she would always say to me every time I'd stop by and see her, and she would say, "Aren't you supposed to be working?" And I would laugh, and I would say, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Well, you're always stopping by. You're always coming over." I go, "Well, I travel a lot. So when I get down to a certain area, and if I haven't been down there, of course, I'm going to stop in and see my grandmother." Unfortunately, I was down in that area every single week, which made it a reoccurring event to see her. But in her mentality, she couldn't grasp that I was not at work during the hours of 7 to 5, that I was able just to come over at 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. and be able to have quality time with my grandmother. A lot of the builder generation that you might see today in the workforce, Warren Buffett, Clint Eastwood, who else? Willie Nelson. I mean, these are builders that are still out there grinding. I mean, they're still out there competing in the music industry. I mean, Willie Nelson out there with his guitar, rocking it out with just another 20-year-old that could be rocking it out He's doing it just as hard and he's grinding just as hard. So if we look at the builder generation, and again, Tom Brocco popularized this term in his bestseller book, is the greatest generation. I mean, they really were. They were the generation that started and built America and where it is today. Wouldn't you say, Hans?
Yeah, definitely. And think about all the changes that took place when they were coming of age, like telephone, electricity, automobiles, airplanes. Just those four things are like earth-shattering, and we think we're going through change. Yeah.
Could you imagine? I mean, right now, our concept of going on an airplane is let's get to Southwest Line first so we can be the first ones on. Back then, in 1930, when my Nana was born, they were maybe didn't have a car, didn't have the means of those transportations yet. There was no reality of thinking I'm going to fly to Colorado and go see Hans. It's a whole different world for them.
So it's really important. Of course, our book is about millennials and boomers, but we think, Patrick and I, that you need to understand all five generations. It really helps the workplace, if the workplace has all the generations in it, to understand how different they are from each other as you relate to them. We have this one contrast that I want to read you about personal values. These are very big generalizations, but I like them. Builders, this is their, I am loyal and humble. Boomers, I'm in charge. Generation X, I'm scrappy. Millennials, I'm awesome. And Generation iGen or Z, I'm fluid. Oh my gosh, who knows what's going to happen to the young up and coming, your kids, your Ty and Lily, and my grandchildren, the world they're growing up into. We can only imagine.
It's going in a different direction. But as we say, change is a good thing. It's just a little harder to accept it. That's all, right?
Right. Boomers, we know who the boomers are. We've spent way too much time on them anyway. And the Generation X, I just want to say, again, they're the people that are in their mid-30s to early 50s, and they are, in some people's minds, in our mind, the forgotten generation. And a lot of them are kind of ticked off, aren't they, Patrick, when I talk to them, like, what about us? You guys talk all this time about millennials, and the millennials are getting all the opportunities and the leadership, and we're being skipped by. Our company is passing us by and promoting the millennials ahead of the Gen X. I've noticed that a lot, but it's an important generation, Gen X.
I mean, it is. They're very important. There are a lot of those positions are in the management, teaching. They're in that level. It's just, as I say, not the problem. The problem for them is there's 86 million millennials right behind them that are, like I said, 38-year-old or 40-year-old is just 7 years older than me, but I've had the same amount of experience in business with them. So we are competing in the nature of work and life. And they also have the same parents as us. They could be raised by a boomer and have a millennial brother or sister. And that's what's interesting.
That's very true.
Hard fact to grasp. It really is, because as my wife sits today, she was born from Xer parents, and she's a millennial. And then we're the same age, but my parents are boomers, and I'm a millennial. So very different lifestyles, but again, they're there along with us, and we're competing with them, but also thriving together just like we are with the boomers.
So those are the three big generations in the workforce. And again, our quest is to create respect and understanding between the generations, because a lot of productivity is lost in the workforce today in America by misunderstandings and conflict between the generations. Well, I think we're about up for our time on this video. We just kind of wanted to give an overview. And again, by the way, we haven't mentioned our website, MillennialBoomNow.com. Check us out and be sure and check out the book Millennial Boom.
Hey, we'll see you guys next time. Again, Really great having you on these series. We're going to get more in depth. But again, what I recommend is if you haven't gotten the book, get it now. You'll be able to follow along a lot closer. Leave some comments below, and we look forward to seeing you on the next videos.